You can proceed now.
Oh, thank you, sir. Very good evening to one and all. We are happy to have you all back to our YouTube channel, Bttc Official, for the second series of our collaborative webinar on qualitative research. Today, the fourth day of our webinar session 8, I take this opportunity to welcome you all once again to this platform. Before moving on to next session, I would like to give you a glimpse of today's morning session highlights. The morning we have with us Dr. Mandeep Kochar, Associate Professor, Vice Principal, Bombay Teachers Training College, who took session on case study research, and Dr. Meenakshi Lat, Associate Professor, Bombay Teachers Training College, moderated her session. She highlighted what is case study, who all can conduct case study, and she linked her session with a pre-session survey conducted one day prior with the participants of this webinar. She differentiated case study method with case study research and action research. Dr. Mandeep Kochar further elaborated upon purpose of case study research, how to conduct a research study, and categories of case studies. She also clarified whether review of literature hypotheses are important or can we have only research questions when we conduct case study research. She commented that ethical issues are the biggest challenge in carrying out case study research, and um, it's very time consuming. She also talked about benefits about case study research. Further moving on, I take great pride in welcoming today's resource person, Professor Anjali Vajpayee from Faculty of Education, Benares Hindu University. She has been associated with BHU for last 30 years, first as a student, then joined the BHU as a faculty. She has guided about a dozen PhD students. Madam has published more than 30 research articles in various national and international journals. Dr. Anjali Vajpayee Madam has co-authored 2 books and conducted 1 minor and 1 major research. She is associated with IGNOU Center, ICSSR and UGC and member of various committees. She is currently coordinator, curriculum policy and research at BHU. She is member of various committees at Benares Hindu University, such as Grievance Cell, Research Development Committee, School Board Allotment Committee, and many more. Professor Anjali has been the coordinator for part-time B.Ed program till 2016. Madam is involved in organizing seminars, both national and international level. Also, she is inspirational in getting the grant for PMM MNMTT scheme of MHRD, and BHU has been granted the School of Education on November 2016. Ma'am, I am very much sure today the participant will definitely going to benefit from your session with your expertise in this field. Today's topic, developing unstructured tools for qualitative research. As a layman's view, I want to interpret like this. Imagine that you want to understand why your mother loves making pancake for breakfast. You may sneak around the kitchen tracking when and how she makes pancake, or you would just sit down and chat with her. Most of you will agree with me that chat will give much better answer. If you want to understand people beliefs or thoughts, number won't give full picture. Interactions or conversation with people or more specific unstructured interviews often help researchers gain deeper insights into why people do what they do. The unstructured interviews, open questions allow the respondents to talk in some depth, choosing their own words. Today, we have with us Professor Anjali Vajpayee to give more insights into this topic. We are very happy to have you with us today. Ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, Priya ma'am. And thank you, Dr. Bilani, the staff of Bttc Mumbai, and of course, Professor Shefali Pandya for giving me this opportunity to interact with you all. It's actually my pleasure to interact with so many people on a virtual platform. And definitely, this is all new to all of us, but it gives us more reach. I mean, we would have thought twice or thrice before I could come to Mumbai or you all could reach Varanasi to listen to me, but this virtual platform has definitely given us this, that it has made distances smaller. When I'm talking of today's topic about the unstructured questionnaires or unstructured tools of research, let me just go back to the background which all of you have been hearing for last, I think, 3 days, that there are two types of research paradigms which we all talk about. It is the quantitative and the qualitative, the positivist and the other way around. Now, the thing was ki when we want more of inferential data, when we want deep understanding of the things occurring around us, either it be phenomena, either it be case studies, or it may be certain particular cultural groups, we do not require certain structured tools. Like I say, when we are talking of structured tools, I say we have examples like we take inchy tape. Now, if you take a measuring inchy tape, it is structured. The markings are predetermined that 1 meter will be like this. And when we measure any length from it, we can say that this length is absolutely this much of the other length, or it is shorter, it is bigger, anything. But when we come to, and this is generally true for the physical variables, like we say, it can be temperature, we can have a 0 degree temperature, we can have 100 degree temperature, and also for certain weight or other thing. But when we come to the human variables, that is why there was a shift in the paradigm from quantitative to qualitative, because we felt that human variables cannot be quantified in absolute terms. And therefore, to understand them, if we put them into certain categories of yes, no, 1, 2, 3, 4, or certain values, it is not always justified for those behaviors which we want to measure. And similarly, it goes for when we are talking of human variables, it goes for the variables which are related to education also. And it goes for health also. See, we are facing the COVID pandemic right now, and there are articles that people have different immunity level, people of different, and that is like somebody, a particular case may react to that same virus in some other way, and other case may react in other ways. So there is, and then we generalize that, we say those are certain people who are having more susceptibility to the virus, maybe because they have diabetes, maybe because they have BP. But then also there is difference, some may recover fast, some may recover slowly, because again I say it is, we are dealing with humans. So when we come to this shift in paradigm of qualitative research, where we said when we are talking of people in general, it is not always good to generalize things, because people with feelings may react to different situations, different conditions in a different way, and therefore that paradigm of qualitative research emerged. And when the paradigm emerged, then we required, whatever research we have to do, we have to have certain instrument which will help us in getting the information for this particular study, this particular research. So as we say, there was like when we say, when we are talking of uh, the qualitative research, the first work we can say of Malinowski, when he went to field studies. He went to an Australian island because he was actually a Polish who had come and settled in Britain, and then he wanted to. He went to Australia for certain work, and when he went there, the First World War had broken him. So, because he was a Polish, and the Poland were on the other side of Britain, and Britain at that time was having Australia as their colony. So when Malinowski went there, he was kept as an intern. He had to report to the government, and he took this opportunity to go and study a particular group of people in an Australian island. And from there, he developed that field study method. And also, that was the origin of ethnographical studies. And there he said, when you have to study people, it is better that you have interviews, you have observations, you have field notes, and not limit yourself to certain structured tools which can measure the behavior. So there, how the shift in paradigm happened, and it was all in the beginning of the 20th century, the early part of the 20th century. And then there were various tools which were developed for this unstructured type of studies, where we said we have to have in-depth information of how the participant, how the community, how the group feels. And when this was devised, then we had that alternative instruments which were thought of, which were not just those instruments which recorded data in quantities, because for in-depth studies we felt that we need more interaction with the person and how he feels. And very nicely Dr. Priya has elaborated ki how, if you have to know how to make a particular recipe, asking in a different way will be better than just quantifying. And many times, if I say you learn cooking right by observing, if you see the recipes, they give you some quantities, and if you sometimes, if you do those quantity, it may not turn out to be exactly be as good. But if you have observed somebody, you might get, and if you have made certain changes, you might get something. So with this background, I would like to share my screen with you, and I would come to how the basic flow of my lecture will be. First, I'll be talking about the structured and the unstructured tools in a very short way. And then I will shift to the questions which are there in the unstructured tools, which we usually call as open-ended questions. And then how the two tools which we generally use these open-ended questions for, the questionnaire and the interview. And then how these questionnaire and interview, generally the difference what is there between questionnaire and interview, it's not a very, there is a very thin line dividing them. So we'll be talking of them intermittently, changing from one to another. And then we will talk about the interviews, and then probably I'll talk how this interview technique came into uh, practice, and how unstructured interview were uh, origin of a feminist philosophy which believed that the structured interview did not let the participant express their views in a very flowing form, and they dominated the views of the participants. So how that came, and then if we have time, I like to share a YouTube video which I came across just to summarize. So with that, I'll share my screen, and I hope the screen is visible. Dr. Priya, hello.
Yes, madam, very well. Please
Yes,
go
Right.
now
ahead.
it is visible.
Okay. So I begin, as I said, with the basic comparison between structured and unstructured tools. So the structured tool is a one in which a particular set of predetermined questions are prepared by the interviewer in advance. Now we are using the word interviewer because generally these structured tools may be used for various other forms, but we are referring to a structured and an unstructured interview. Otherwise, it can be a structure tool can be used as a Likert scale, as a multiple choice type question, or in achievement test, in an attitude scale. But because we'll be referring to interview, that is why we have said, I've put that word interview. And unstructured tool refers to an interview where the questions to be asked to the respondent are not set in advance, like they're free flowing. Data collection in a structured tool, again, I said it can be an attitude scale, it can be achievement test, it can be a opinionaire, it can be a structured questionnaire, is generally quantitative. That is, when we have large amount of data which we have to generalize, we take generally structured tools where the responses are limited, because we have to quantify those responses and come to some conclusion on those. In unstructured tools, as we have said, in the qualitative researches, it can be a case study, it can be an ethnographical study, it can be a phenomenology. You've been hearing about them. It generally we use, it can be a grounded theory, we use unstructured tools. The research is descriptive. In unstructured tools, we have the research which is exploratory. Types of questions in unstructured tools are closed-ended. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 options. If it's a rating scale, you may have a 5-option scale, you may have a 3-option scale. If it is a multiple choice type question, it may have 4 options, 5 options. As in unstructured tool, you have questions which are open-ended. The responses are not limited to the choices given by the researcher or the interviewer or the person who has prepared the questionnaire. Factors evaluated are explicit, which are visible, and factors which are evaluated by an unstructured tools are implicit, which are your feelings, which have to be brought out by certain ways, certain interaction. It is generally used by the positivists, and the unstructured tools are generally used by the interpretives, who have to interpret the information which they have obtained by talking to you, by whatever you have written in a detailed manner. The application is generally when you have a large number of students and you have to generalize the data, and the application in unstructured tool is generally when you have to have a deep understanding of certain phenomena, a person. You have to see why he's acting in such a way, he's performing in such a way, why a particular group is doing what it is. Now, generally for this, now after this, when we have this basic background that we are talking about two types of tools, now we shift to the unstructured tools which have the open-ended items. We said that unstructured tool is a tool which has got items which do not have responses which are predetermined by the researcher. The responses can be anything. There can be certain very new responses which the researcher, the interviewer had never thought about. And so the unstructured questions are those items which do not have a fixed response between and the respondent are free to do as they want to respond to them. The items which are unstructured make this unstructured. It can be an interview, it can be a questionnaire. The questionnaire is generally used when we want a factual information. And if you refer to John W. Best, he has mentioned in a very nice way that a difference, again, I say, Best is one of the best books for educational research. He has explained things in such a simplified way. So he gives a one liner that a questionnaire is something when which we want in a written form, and when we cannot have things in written form, we cannot have that information in written form, we may shift to an interview. So there is a very fine line dividing a questionnaire, a open-ended questionnaire, and an open-ended interview. Like I said, a questionnaire can be in a written form, and when we are not, there may be cases when the respondent may not be able to respond because he may not be literate, because he may not feel comfortable in writing the information. There may be various language problems, or a person might just feel lazy in writing. But it is always easy to talk. See, if you ask to write few pages, you may take time, but if you are asked to talk, you are generally more free. So there is a very fine line which Best has quoted, that an open-ended questionnaire is generally in a written form, and an open-ended interview is when the person talks to a person in orally. So open-ended questionnaire can be used for an interview if you are talking to a person in face-to-face mode. Again, an example, if we say I was talking about the open-ended question, if you suppose you are using a Likert scale which has got 5 options, and you have a question on how is the staff morale. So there can be the staff morale is high, a person may strongly agree, he may disagree, he may be neutral, he may strongly disagree, or he may just disagree. So this is a limited response. While if you have an open-ended question, you might just say that share your feelings about staff morale. Now this may have many options which are not there in agree, strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. You may come out with certain innovative items, because a person may be willing to tell you that he is able to uh, share his views in a written form which is other than these 4 5 limited response. He may feel that a staff morale is better if you give more empowerment, staff morale is better when you listen to people, staff morale is better when there is greater interaction between people. But if you have those 5 point scale, you may just get 5 options of agree which actually do not reveal anything. So the thing is ki, these open-ended questions give you much more than any limited response question. Like we can have a multiple choice type question which may say a place which you might like to visit in your holidays: Mumbai, Delhi, Chennai, and Kolkata. But a person may like to visit some other place. So you can just give an open-ended question which will be your favorite destination for a holiday. And then you might get many responses. So that is the advantage of an open-ended question. Now, if we just summarize this in a systematic form, we can say the advantage of open-ended question is there is no limit to answers. We have said it can be happy, unhappy. Like if we are saying that a person may give new responses which he has liberty to express what he wants. So you do not get limited to a particular set of answers which are provided by uh, interviewer or the researcher. Then, and again, the medium for respondent is there is to answer the medium for respondent to answer creativity. If you are using the open-ended questions, there may be very creative new responses which you never thought of. Because like I said, there was a child, he was asked if you rated A, B, C, D. He said A, B, C, D. But if you were asked how you want to be rated, he may say many different things. I want to be rated good for this, bad for this, perfect for this, or I might want certain star, I might want a prize in the form of certain books. So there can be, if you are having an open-ended question, you might have responses which you never think of. Then they responded may stun you with their vision and creativity they show with their answers, and because it gives their personal experiences which are there. So when you are using the open-ended question, expect the unexpected. In close-ended questions, you do not have choices, but in open-ended questions, you can get nth number of responses. And therefore, when you're getting responses which are very very different. There is very difficulty also in these type of questions, because you never expected those responses. These responses can be an educational tip, it can be a marketing tip, it can be a creative idea. Like I there was the Ministry of Human Resource Development had asked open ended, what are your suggestions for online education or online education in the current COVID scenario? And I'm sure they must have got certain uh, ideas which must have been out of blue, which I mean, even those people who were thinking there wouldn't have thought of. And when you're talking to people also, you get so many ideas. I was other day hearing to a seminar on this COVID situation, and there was a University of Samoa. They said we give a zero value sim to our students to see that they are connected with us. So these are the things which, if you have open-ended questions, you can have responses which are not expected, and you can get something out of the blue which is very new to you, which may just give you some, we say we can have that buzz sessions, we can have some new ideas which are certain brainstorming, which can give us certain new visions to Kikule, if you remember, the if you people of science background, they said that it is said that the model of benzene, he had an intuition of it, how benzene ring was formed. He saw serpents in a vision, and then that benzene ring was formed. So there are so many things which can, if you do not limit a person's response, you can get. And also, if we go further, we can say we can get answers to complicated situations. There may be situations, like I said, this COVID situation. 6 months ago, we had never thought of that we will be in such a situation where we will be interacting with each other in a virtual mode. We always prefer to interact with each other personally. We are such a close knit society, and therefore, but this situation, it gave us such new ideas. We are exploring such a new platform, so we can get for critical, unthought of situation, for a very peculiar situation. If we do not have closed ended questions, we can get open ended questions can give us solutions. And they best in situations where the respondents are expected to give your feedback, their troubles, because you cannot express your difficulties in 5 points, in four options. It is very difficult. If you have to express your difficulties which you're facing, you have to be given more of choices which have to be there. And then it helps us to understand our target groups in a better way, be it children, be it our people who are there in the market situation, whoever it is, the stakeholders. If we are giving them choices, or if we are talking to them to express their views as they think, it is always better that they are free to express what they feel. And the it also helps us to reveal a lot how the respondent may feel in a particular situation, how their brain function. As I said, all of us, we keep on talking that we are individually different. All of us have a different thought process. We react to uh, even scientifically it is said that no two individuals except the identical twins, and in them also, if the environment is different, their reactions will be different. So how they behave, it's different. Their thoughts will be different. Even the identical twins who have the same genetic combination, they behave in a different way. And then, so how can you limit responses to 4, 5, 3 to peoples who are so individually different? So that is what key respondents are free to respond in the way they want. And when they respond in the way they want, you generally get more out of them. You get more, you come to know more about them. So when there is a study which wants to study people, cultures, uh, groups deeply, you cannot limit yourself into a question which is structured. And therefore these open-ended questions, when used, they bring help in bridging the gap between the person who is there. See, when you are there in the interview, it is generally believed that when we come to interviews, we'll see it is, if you're talking to teacher community, if a teacher is there, it is generally they are more free. See, when we are having television interviews and we say a coffee with Karan, all the stars talk very freely to Karan Johar because he's of their own fraternity. Maybe if a person from other, if a journalist is there, they might get a bit skeptical ki ye is the question might lead to some answer which may not be actually be very very taken in a very uh, positive way, or it may lead to various other permutation combinations. So when they're talking to people of other fraternity, they are more cautious. So similar goes when children, when parents, when cultural group people, they talk to people of their own group, they are more free. So that is also there when we are having a unstructured interview, and the interviewee is a person amongst themselves. A interviewee is a person who is close to them. A interviewee is a person with whom they have interacted before. They are more free in giving their options, and since the options come in a free flowing way and the interviewee has established a rapport with the interviewer, then there is chances that we may get to informations which were actually never evident before. So these are the advantages of the open ended questions, which are generally used in the open ended questionnaire or an open ended unstructured interview. See, a structured interview, a structured questionnaire will have r- questions which will have responses which are predetermined. An unstructured open ended questionnaire, an unstructured open ended interview will have questions which have responses which are not predetermined, which are not pre thought of, which give a free flow of uh, ideas, which give a free flow of responses from the respondent. But all is not so rosy when you're talking of open-ended questions. When you're doing researches, open-ended questions can give us lot of information. They give us lot of creative ideas. They may give us lot of insight into a person's feeling. But when you have to arrange these feelings, when you have to put them into order, you have to think a lot. So that is why generally when we have to do a large sample study, when we have to generalize things, we cannot limit ourselves to open-ended questions, because, and that is why we see generally the all the competitive exams where we have to select people by elimination, they do not go for long answer type of questions, because when you have large number of people, you cannot just go on open-ended questions, because the responses will be varied and you will not be able to select particular idea, particular criteria, particular use. Like if you have to manufacture a shirt or a shoe, generally you manufacture those shoe sizes which are opted by large number of people. Customization comes later on, and that requires lot of resources, that requires lot of effort from the side of both for whom it is being customized and who is doing the customization. So generally if you go into the market, you will see clothes, you will see brands having shirts of the same type, same number, large. But when you go to a tailor, you can have your own choice thing made. So there is a difference. When you have to have large number of things, you cannot go for the open-ended question. And therefore, these are the disadvantages of the open-ended questions. That is, first of all, it is time consuming. That is, unstructured questionnaires are a lot more time consuming in comparison to other research type of questions. This is because they are typically not pre-arranged. The answers are not limited. They can, uh, they the results are cannot be quantified into 1 2 3, and the data generalizability and representativeness is not there, because you are having a very small sample on which you are correcting. However, the unstructured interviews, when you are having few a small sample size, you have to do a small case, you are limited to a particular, then it is okay. And then also it takes a lot of time of the researcher. Then there is another thing, there is opportunity for biases, both from the uh, point of view of the interviewer and from the point of view of the interviewee. What happens generally, biases comes because, when, again, if you like a person, you put his responses in a likable way. If you do not like a person, his responses can be interpreted in a unlikable. And that example we have been seeing again and again when uh, the media talks to the celebrities. If they want to uh, uh, put the rating, or if it's a popular celebrity and they they like him, they will put his quotes in such a way that they appear good. And if suppose they have some prejudice against that particular person, then they may put the same quote in a certain way that it might represent other sort of. So there is one thing, that although open-ended question give a lot of scope to a person to put his views, but those views can be taken in both ways. They can be discrimination due to stereotypes, they can be discrimination that due to how people think, and there can be discrimination due to certain accepted phenomena which are occurring. So there is where the open ended question have biases which are definitely not there. See, if you like a person, we generally say, when you have subjective answers and objective answers, whoever is evaluating, if a objective answer, the capital of India is Delhi, everyone will write Delhi. But the which city you wants to live, if somebody says a city of your choice, you might rate his answer in a better way. And if somebody likes a city of their own choice, you might have been to that city and you might have not felt that it is not so good, and then you might rate his answer differently. So that biases on the person who is uh, uh, getting to put the data in a orderly way, those are definitely there. And then we say that there is the halo effect, is a common bias which we experience in the unstructured interview or unstructured question, or the subjective questions, as we generally have in classrooms also. A student whom we think is good, he writes something and he misses few points, we say he might have missed due to some problem, or he might just have forgotten, because this student knows everything. And another student who we might feel is not so good in performing in the class, even if he writes, even if he misses certain point, we say because he doesn't study properly, therefore he is not able to write the things correctly. So that sort of biases are always there, that halo effect, that the what you feel about a person that carries with you when you are studying his responses, his unstructured responses. Suppose you go to a culture and you are very fond of that as that particular culture of that group, you will always be praising it. And we have seen this in the historical reviews, we have seen this in the cases, we have seen it in our own. See, everyone now, everyone is doing namaste. Otherwise, we felt, "Arey, namaste is, why should we do? We should shake hands because everyone is." Now, because COVID has said, we said, okay, namaste is a better way. So those are the things how you do it. Then the one big technical problem in open-ended questions is that we have a difficulty in comparing the data. See, first of all, we said there will be a large amount of data which can be obtained. We have responses which we have never thought of. Now, if we are having those responses, how to categorize those responses, how to analyze those responses, how to conclude from those responses is a challenging task, because you have had large number of unsystematic, unthought of ideas which were never there when you thought of comparing a thing. So that difficulty of arranging the data and coming out with the suitable results, or with the results quickly, takes a long time, and that is why we said those are time consuming in both. In response also, if you're talking to a person, if he has to answer 10 question in a rating form, he might just take 2 minutes. But if it is an unstructured form, the questions may not be 10. First of all, there may be uh, more than you thought of, beginning with 2 questions, but they led to 10 questions and then led to 15 questions. So first of all, time in getting the responses is more, then time in arranging that responses is more, and then time to conclude from those responses is more. So that is basically the biggest challenge when we have open ended questions. And therefore we say open ended questions cannot be used for studies which have to be general. And if they are used, then we have to have various other sets, like we say when we are having those CBSE school exams, we have two types of questions. We have closed questions and we have open-ended questions also. But then those questions, just to remove the biases, just to remove the time, just to have, we give time to the evaluator, we give him certain parameters, that these are the parameters where which have to be considered when you evaluate, so that those biases on part of the evaluatee is removed. So similarly is the case with interviews. If you are having a large number of interviews, first to conduct large number of interviews is difficult. It was generally believed that you can mail open-ended questions to large number of people, and you can expect their responses from it. And nowadays we can have, also we can use emails and everything. But the respondents, to respond to open-ended questions, you will see generally you will not get many response your questionnaires back. The responses will be less. While if it is a closed-ended questionnaire which you have mailed, which you have given in a written form, you might get that back quickly, because the respondent doesn't have to think to answer. The choices are given in front of him. While when you are having open-ended questions, he has to think, he has to uh, write, he has to speak. So those are, that is what I said, the biggest challenge, the time, and how to put that data apart from the biases. Now if we proceed further, how to write open-ended questions. There are, again, I would refer to John W. Best. He has given certain very good examples of open-ended question. Best says, see that your questions are not double-barreled. See, it is clear what you are asking for. Like he has also only described that what is the value of your house. Now, value of your house, if this question is asked, it may get varied response from various people. So now if you are asking that to a person who is living in that house, he has emotional value to this house, uh, it does not have any value for him. But if you just specify what is the monetary value of your house, then maybe that person may be able to give you, yeah, this is these many lakhs, this many crores, or whatever it is. But value, so when you're asking the open ended questions, you should be very clear of what you want to say. So how to write effective open-ended question? If we just refer to the slides which I have prepared, understand the difference between open-ended and closed-ended question. Before you start putting your questions to a paper, you need to have absolute clarity on open-ended versus closed-ended question. Your objective of sending an outline survey should be clear. Based on that, you can evaluate the kind of question you want. See, first of all, when you're making choice, you should be clear why, which type of question I'm selecting. If it is an open-ended question, then what I want to ask. These are usually used when we open-ended questions, when are used when we have feelings or feedback of a person, a stakeholder, which is highly valued. So to get transparent feedback, you do not have to lead the customer or the stakeholder. You should leave him ideas. So you should be clear what you want from him, and you should be clear what expectations you have. So that should be clear in your a person who is making an open-ended questionnaire or preparing an open-ended interview. Create, then next you should have a list of open-ended questions before curating the surveys, because we said these questions are not predetermined. You do not know when what situation will come and what you will have to ask. So once you get clarity on what open-ended questions are and how to implement them, figure out list of survey questions which you want to use. So very clearly, these are the questions to begin with. You can have a fair share of open-ended question in your survey. This number can fluctuate depending upon the responses you receive. Again, when you're talking, you can have 10, 20 questions. Sometimes you might have to ask all those questions. Other time you might just have to limit yourself to few questions, because the respondent may have responded to your queries even before you ask the question. Then reconstruct any question into an open-ended question. Observation is the key here. Observe what kind of question you usually ask your customer, your prospective stakeholder, and every other person you come across. Analyze whether question you ask are closed-ended or open-ended. Try to convert those closed-ended. Any closed-ended question can be converted into open-ended one when you think you need a better result or a valuable insight. And again, it is said, just to see that you are getting a better insight, generally follow up a closed ended question with an open ended question. That works better. Actually, like we said, what is the staff morale? If we had a Likert type of scale, we would say we had 5 options. But again, if we, what can things be done to promote staff morale, we will get many other responses. So there, this complementation of this closed ended question with an open ended question gives wonderful result. And we have so many answers which give us a deep insight to a closed-ended question if it is followed by an open-ended question. So many times in unstructured interviews also, we begin with a closed-ended question, and generally as we proceed further, we take a hint from that closed-ended question and follow it up with open-ended questions. Now, when we have open-ended questions, there are generally these open-ended items can be distinguished or categorized into three types of open-ended items. And this was again an article by Popping, which I was going through when I was studying for open-ended unstructured question. And he categorized it into these three categories. He said there can be one technically open-ended question, which the technically open-ended question is found when the user has to fill some digits letter having specific meaning. This type is among other found when year of birth is asked. And fourth letter, so it is technically open-ended, but your responses are limited. Then there is a apparent open-ended question. In a situation of an apparent open-ended question, the respondent is asked to write down the answer that comes from a list that is too long to be included in a questionnaire. An example is, which newspaper do you read at home? Now, this is apparently it is open-ended, but you have been given various sort of options from which you have to choose. This type of question is used for all questions that have answers that fit the list, like a religious affiliation, ethnic background, language spoken at home, magazines read, and so on. It has got a self-completion format. And then there is the really open-ended question, where the respondent is all free to respond whatever he has in his mind. Like example which I have, this is an example from voting pattern for a party. It can be there, why you vote for it, do you like it, or why uh, uh, there can be any reason for which a person can vote for a party. And this, if you limit apparent open-ended question, technically open, you would good 4 5 choices, these are there key better. Apparent open-ended question, you have list, it is open-ended, but they have apparent choices. Really open-ended, there is no list, you can have any number of responses which are open. And therefore, when we are talking of open-ended question, we are talking of really open-ended question. Again, we said we can begin from the technical open-ended question, then come to apparent open-ended question, and then move on to the really open-ended questions. Now, there it has been very well stated here the use of three type of open-ended question. The technical apparent open-ended questions are alternatives to their closed questions. They seem better tools to get an answer to a specific question, while really open-ended question might be used for theory construction. That is, you might get some insightful, wonderful, creative ideas which may use which may be helpful in constructing, reconstructing certain belief, certain theory which is there. So when a new theory has to be developed, you need to have actually the open-ended question, because closed-ended question can lead to generalization. But to have theory building, you have to have creative insight into things. So when you use these open-ended questions, when you have to have, you have to get what, how, where, when, why of any phenomena, of any case, of any situation. If you have to answer question related to this, we generally use the open-ended question. Now, coming back to where these open-ended questions are used, we said we can have two. We can have a questionnaire, which is an open-ended questionnaire, which is having a question which is unstructured. That is, you are free to respond as you want. Secondly, we said this questionnaire is used in oral form. It can be a interview. So questionnaire, if you generally, what happens if you have unstructured questionnaire, having too many questions which the respondent has to answer, and if it is not for your examination or absolutely compulsory, people generally avoid giving lengthy responses to unstructured questionnaire. So it is always better, if you are having an unstructured questionnaire, you use it in a oral form, and that is a interview. So a unstructured questionnaire is generally a written format. An unstructured questionnaire, when asked orally, in a oral mode, because of language situation, because of a respondent may be comfortable uh, more in answering orally, because maybe he doesn't know how to write, or maybe he just feel lazy, as I said earlier, to write down the answers. We use the interview in oral form, and that unstructured questionnaire, when used in oral form, is an unstructured interview. So now we'll be talking of unstructured interview. Unstructured interview, as we can see here in the slide, or it is called non-directive interview, because we do not know from beforehand where we have to go. It can be we are leaving our respondent free. So these unstructured interview, these non-directive interviews are considered opposite to the structured interview, which offer a set amount of standardized question. The form of unstructured interview varies widely, with some question being prepared in advance in relation to a topic that a researcher or an interview wishes to cover. They tend to be more informal and free flowing than a structured interview, much like a everyday conversation. Probing is seen to be the part of research process that differentiates the in-depth unstructured interview from an everyday conversation. Probing, that you hint, you lead people, you redirect, that is your question, you can reframe your question, that differs from an everyday conversation of while you are having a in-depth interview. The nature of conversation allows for spontaneity and for questions to develop during the course of the interview, which is based on interviewee's response. Again, I said, you may never think of the response which the interviewee gives, and therefore you'll have to reframe or restructure or redirect your question at that point of time. And that is what is expected from a good interview. You see, everyone cannot conduct a good interview. You have to have those certain capabilities to be a good interview, because you have to see how, because sometimes your question may just put off a respondent, and then he may not just close himself in the shell and not answer them. So that has to be, your question should be such that if you feel that this question, the respondent is affected in some adverse way, you must just restructure your question in such a way that he feels comfortable. Oh, this was not offending me in this way. So the chief feature of unstructured interview is the idea of probe questions that are designed to be as open as possible. It is a qualitative research technique, tool, method, and accordingly prioritizes validity and the depth of interviews answer. One of the potential drawbacks is the loss of reliability. We'll talk of this when we come later about the validity and the reliability of the unstructured questionnaire, and thereby making it more difficult to do patterns among the interviewees' responses in comparison to structured interview. This we discussed when we were discussing the questions, unstructured and structured question, that to come out to, because we do not have a pattern, we even if we try, we might get such responses which do not fit into a pattern. So that is where the problem lies. Again, I would there are two types of two ways in which the unstructured interview have been classified. There can be many ways. I have taken only two ways. This is the source of this classification is John W. Best, and the source which I'll go later is another Poppings, that article which I was referring to about the unstructured interview. So Best has divided the unstructured interviews into three types. Informal conversational interview, in which the characteristic, he says, the question emerge from immediate context and are asked in a natural course of things. There is no predetermination of questions or wording. The strength of these is increases the salience and relevance of the question. Interviews are built on and emerge from observations. The interviews can be matched to individuals and circumstances, and different information collected from different people with different question, less systematically and comprehensively. It can, certain questions do not arise naturally. Data organization and analysis can be quite difficult. So this is an informal conversational interview. Then we say there is another one which is more structured. It can be a interview guide approach. The topics and issues to be covered are specified in advance. The informal interview, we had not planned anything. We just said, let's go to the field and talk to a person. Here we have certain more crystallized things. In outline form, the interviewer decides sequence and wording of the question in course of the interview. Already we have the pool of questions, we have the words with us. The outline increases the comprehensiveness of the data. So whatever data we are getting, it is more in a systematic form. Logical gaps in the data can be anticipated and closed. Conversational and situational, it can be conversational and situational based. Important and salient topics may be inadvertently omitted. Interviewers' flexibility in sequencing and wording questions can result in substantially different responses from different perspectives, thus reducing the comparability of responses. That is the weakness. And then we come to the standardized open-ended interview. The exact wording and the questions are determined. And generally, the interviews which we are seeing in TV, those are the standardized. The interview and the interviewer have gone through those questions before. They know what question is coming. So even if we feel those days are spontaneous, those are not spontaneous. Those are pre-structured open-ended question. The responses are, although they appear open-ended, but they are structured from before. The exact wording and sequence of questions are determined in advance. All interviewees are asked same basic questions in the same order. We may give the list of the questions to the person whom, and we may allow him to think, and then he can give the list. Respondents answer the same question, thus increasing, because the schedule those has been given. If we have 10 respondents, they all know what question coming next and what we, so we have a response which is comparable. Data is complete for each person on the topic C. The informal conversation, we did not know what questions will come and where it will come. So we might be getting different questions for a different person, and we might be getting different response from a different person. But here it is more systematic, reduces the interviewer's effect and biases when several are used. The weaknesses are little flexibility in relating the interviewer to a particular individual and circumstances, because we have already structured the responses which we are getting are those thought over from before, although they are open-ended, but they are the structure has been, we do not, even if we have a certain new question, we from the response we do not ask it. And limit naturalness, because the questions are from already thought of, already the logical sequence has been arranged, so it is not there. The answers may not be spontaneous and natural as we had in the informal conversational interview. So we get, but this, what type of unstructured interview we have to use, that should be the prerogative of the researcher. He must decide from before. Does he want a totally informal interview? Does he want a interview with interview guide approach, or he wants a interview with set of open-ended questions? The question are open-ended, but the question order is same. The questions are same for all. We will not deviate from the number of the questions and the structure of the questions. That is, this will come after this. Another, as I said, Popping has also said there can be three types of unstructured interview. One is oral interview, then there is a creative interview, and then there is a postmodern interview. Oral interview is a type of unstructured interview that gathers historical information about a research subject by interviewing individuals who have knowledge of experiences of research subject. It aims at gathering different perspective of these experience in order to arrive at objective finding. Methods of recording interview in oral history include audio tapes, video tapes, and transcription of structured interviews. Oral history is a unique method of gathering information, thoughts, and multiple perspectives and understanding the research subject from point of view of other individuals. So again, we see how we can use. And then there is a creative interview, is a type of unstructured interview that is flexible in nature, does not abide by traditional rules and sequence of conducting an interview. Like if we go to the best classification, it can be the informal type of interview. And then there is a postmodern interview. A postmodern interview is a collaborative approach to conducting an unstructured interview. In a postmodern interview, the roles are flexible. This gives the researcher the opportunity to gather more diverse information from different angles. During a postmodern interview, the researcher and the interviewee switch position at intervals in a bid to gather diverse information. Also, this method combines pre-mediated questions with spontaneous inquiry in order to create a deeper understanding of research subject. So something like the interview guide, if we go to the best classification. So generally we see that there are unstructured interview, which can be really unstructured, which are all free flowing, we do not determine. Then there can be certain paradigms which can be certain areas which can be fixed, certain issues, certain aspects that can be fixed, and we do not have to diversify. And then there can be actually open-ended structured interview where we predetermine the questions which we have in our interview. Although the questions remain the same, the number of questions remain the same, only the questions are open-ended type. Each has their own advantages and disadvantages, which we have discussed. Now like we were talking, how do we record an interview, or how do we uh, put these information in an interview uh, in a in a recorded form? See, if either a interviewee can take notes while you are taking an interview, you can just jot down what the respondent is saying, but you might just miss. If we have a questionnaire, a person can respond written form, we have that data in written form. But we said generally when we cannot have data in written form because of language, because of time, because the person may not be able to read or write, or because the person may be just lazy to answer in the written form, then we take an interview. So the interviewer has to write down everything. Either he can write down, or he can use various ways of using. We can have audio types. Now, earlier we had audio, now we can have our mobile phones, we can have various recording devices that the data is recorded at that time. Then we can also have interview, we can have it on television, we can have through telephones, we can have interview through we can have now, we can have interview through Zoom, we can have interview through Google Meet, we can have interview Microsoft Team, we can just connect to a person and we say you are, or we can have face to face interviews like we have the television, um, where which is recorded and played again and again. Or then we can have, like we said, we can have unstructured interview using a cam recorder. Participants are provided feedback in line with research conducted. Unstructured interviews usually contain more open-ended questions that allow interviews to give much information required. So the thing is, when we are having the interviews, we can have these supplement devices for us, so that we can what we have recorded, what we have put down, if we have missed certain things in our writing or while we were jotting down, we can again refer to these recordings and see where we can come back. uh, Now, while I was saying how this interview came from, I said the feminist paradigm, the use of unstructured interview is preferred by feminist researchers who have dismissed what they call mainstream research by men as being too patriarchal and sexist. They claim that there can be distinctive feminist research methods. This approach argued that more conventional scientific methods used by men are not particularly good at helping the researcher to understand social reality, particularly through not exclusively the reality of women. They said, because if you have structured question, you have decided from before what your questions will be. And even if the respondent wants to deviate, they will not. So that is a very patriarchal approach to to a problem. And this, actually, I have written the example of Anne Oakley. Anne Oakley was the first person who used, she was a sociologist in basically an institute of education, and then she did a research on actually the women who want to work after marriage. And uh, so then she said ki if we use structured interview, it limits the choices which the women make. So, and there is a distance because the structures are such, one question comes on another, so the respondent does not feel comfortable with uh, the interview, and therefore they do not actually share their uh, feelings to the grade. And this structured interview manipulate the person who is responding, because you ask the structured question while uh, and therefore the respondent has a very passive role because he's not actually interacting. You have done the structured part of it and you're asking the same question again and again. So they stop from expressing those idea of their own. So that is how these unstructured interviews came to be used. And uh, uh, Anne Oakley, again I'll go back, she was a distinguished British sociologist, feminist and writer, had written numerous academic works. And there she said ki if the interviewee and the interviewer have a very structured form of interview, they do not have intimacy in the responses. So the study which she did in 1974, she interviewed women twice before birth of their children and twice afterwards. Each woman was interviewed for around 9 hours on an average. Women also asked her questions during those interviews, and Oakley responded as openly, as honestly as she wished them to respond. So it was a more reciprocal type of situation. They were interacting in a very un unstereotyped manner. It was a participatory interaction between the two of them. And because OK wanted the respondent to be collaborators in her research rather than just interviews, causing the women become increasingly interested in research and contacting her with any information they thought, even afterwards, like if they felt that they are collaborators, whatever the information they are giving is important and it will affect both of us, so they even shared the information afterwards. Okay, as well use the unstructured interview approach to study women experiences of both housework and maternity cleared. OK interviewed 40 women about how much housework they did and how they and their partners organized domestic work. Both unstructured interview studies were aimed as raising awareness of women experiences and promoting policy of changes. So this was a work which he did, and where, so here we say that this was a sort of origin was a feminist paradigm, that the structured interview do not let the respondent be natural, respond in a natural way. Uh, they 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 limit their responses, while the unstructured interview were more uh, close to heart, more realistic, and more choices of the respondent. They probably, the respondent felt that he was sharing the situation, and therefore uh, unstructured interviews are better in a situation where you want actually to understand your respondent better. And there again, after this study of and OK, you can also feel it actually makes a difference, that as I said earlier, if a woman is interviewing a woman, the responses are better. Again, as I said, actor interviewing a actor, there is more camaraderie between them. Then a person of a particular ethnic origin interviewing a person of that same origin, they might get better and more natural responses. And here also, your language also makes a difference. If you're talking to a person in his or her particular language, you may get more spontaneous responses, uh, rather than in a language which is not more actually natural to a person. So that is also a difference. So a person might respond more naturally, more realistically, more in depth, more without inhibitions to a interviewee who is using questions which are not structured, in an informal environment, in the same language, having same background, and if the setting is also natural, then the things are even better. So this is how the unstructured interview came into origin, and the basic, which I said, the basic thought of the feministic origin of how a tool can be thought of. That is it. Now, there are, like I said, originally also when we were discussing unstructured questions, we said there are certain technical aspects which have to be thought of while you are discussing an unstructured tool or unstructured interview. Just before these technical aspect, I would just like to refer to one more time how you have to, if you have to develop unstructured interview, what steps you have to have. Since I have told you that if unstructured question are there, you have to have a large pool of question on a particular criteria, on a particular content which you think are there, and the language of the question should be correct. The question should not be double barreled. They should not have double negative. And what exactly they want to measure, that should be what exactly, what information they exactly want. Measure, leave out the word measure. What exactly the information they want, that should be very specific. Like I gave that example, that do not say what is the value of your house, what is the monetary value of your house. Value of your house might have numerous responses. So be very specific while you are using the information. And then also the responses which are given by the respondents have help you frame the question. So your language, your what information you want, that should be a sort of clear. Therefore, first step should be you should have a pool of unstructured question of a particular criteria. You can use it as you want, and also if certain new question arises, that should be there. So language should be clear. Then also you can get these questions uh, uh, checked, or you can get a feedback on this question by which you have prepared as a tool by some expert who's there in the same field. Suppose you are working in educational emotional intelligence of children, so those people who have worked in the area of emotional intelligence, you can just refer to their works, you can refer to them, and you can say from those. Again, I said a closed-ended question can always be converted into open-ended question. You can get certain questions from there, and then you can also see whether this. And after you have made these set of question, you can also have a dry run, so that when you go to the respondent, certain ambiguity in thought or certain ambiguity in words which may be felt by the respondent, the when you're having the dry run, it may not be you don't have to do with the actual respondent, it can be a person of a similar background where you can have a dry run. So what we call a tryout in the structured tools, here you can have a very informal tryout just to see that the structure of the questions, the language of the questions does not have a lot of ambiguity. So that is there. When you're writing, you should have a large number of questions, then the language should be clear, the structure of the question should be clear. And just to have these things sorted out or be more uh, checked by somebody, you can just do a dry run, show it to expert of that same field. One or two expert would also be more than enough, and do a dry run with one or two people, that what they interpret from your question, if it is possible. Otherwise, if it is an informal situation, then there may be many questions that may just arise at that same moment. So there is no set pattern of for structured tools, we have a definite, there will be a tryout, there'll be item analysis. Here we do not have such set pattern. Only we can have a rough idea of the tool, a rough format of the tool with us, which has been checked by, because certain questions you might just have to frame at that time, which is and certain new question may arise on the basis of responses if it is a informal. In a structured type of unstructured, like we said, the third type, where we had a very structured type of format for open-ended question, that questions were predetermined, we can still have a set format. But for informal type, you definitely have to be more spontaneous, and that again is a trick. A good interviewer is somebody who can get information from you without even you feeling it, that you are sharing your, and there are your inner details, and there are people who actually are very good at getting out the best from you. So that is important. Then so now if we have the interview, we come to certain technical aspects, like we said, what, because there is no structural format of doing preparing them, so the technical aspects like validity, reliability are also a bit flexible. For structured tool, we have to establish validity, reliability, because otherwise we say if an instrument is not valid, then the data which it gives us, or the information which is gives us, is actually not measuring what is supposed to measure, what it proposed to measure. And reliability is the consistency in the information we get. But for interviews or open-ended questionnaire, we can have two sorts of validity. One is face validity. Like we said, if the question is a questionnaire, or the interviewee's question are about uh, women, their choices about they worked before and after birth of the children, then this question should look like those set of questions. Or either it is about the emotional background of a particular person or study habits, then those questions should be related to study habits. They may not be they may not have limited response, but the questions should have those criteria in mind. So one is that face validity should be there. We must see what the tool is measuring. Actually, it looks like it is measuring that. It cannot be that a tool of study habits will have questions relating to women choices of career. That will not do it. So that face validity has to be there. And then content validity also can be established, because we said we can show that these are the criteria which we want to measure, these are the aspects which we want to measure, and we can show it to the experts and say whether these unstructured question will give us information about this. So two types of validity we can definitely establish of our interview or open-ended question. That is, one is face validity and one is content validity. And in some case also, if a particular construct has to be measured, construct validity can also be established. Now, reliability is a bit difficult. Although you can do reliability, establish reliability is consistency of a tool, that if you have the tool again and again, then you can the same responses have to come. Since here the responses are open-ended, so to get same responses from a person may be difficult, but we can do one thing. Two things can be done to establish reliability. One, we can have question like two questions which measure almost the same thing. So in that only, one after another, we can have similar questions and we can get similar responses. Another thing is, if we have certain, like we said, the third type where we had determined what questions we will ask when, and the order of questions will be same, it will not change. So those sort of interviews can be administered to a person again after some time, and we may see if the responses will exactly will not match, but if the responses are similar, we will see that the reliability is there. Also, we can have a parallel interview about the questions which can be asked and established, but it is very I mean, it is not, if you are asking somebody informally and you ask those questions again and again, those responses may just vary. So reliability is, establishing reliability is a bit a matter of consideration in this, but the credibility of the researcher and context specificity definitely help in establishing reliability, whether it be you can ask the questions again and again. If the person is comfortable with you and he feels that yes, he may answer to your same question again and again, and even if you restructure that question into ways, so that can be done. Then data which is obtained from this interview, to analyze it, there can be ways of doing it. We can do thematic analysis. We can divide the text into themes, or we can do semantic analysis. We can see for certain words, or we can do a mix of both. So these can be done, but this again requires a lot of two words, if they are not taken in the same context, they may give completely different meaning. So that is, even the themes, even the words have to be related to each other. So those things have to be, we can have the text thematic analysis, we can have semantic analysis, and we can have both of it together. That has to be done. And sometimes what we do, if we have we can say we can use computer for doing this text analysis or thematic analysis, but again I would say, even if you refer to your computer, you look for this word I, his, her in this, or how many times a particular person is using book, so that may show that what sort of hobby he has. But again, you have to be very clear what the context is, because that it has to be referred to the larger question that is there. So this analysis of data, it can be on the basis of themes, it can be on the basis of words, but total aspect has to be taken in consideration. And then that is why it is found to be difficult when you are having the text analysis, and interviews are there with you, so to put them into certain categories, into order, to put the data so that we can come to certain inferences, that is definitely challenging. And therefore coding has to be done to for the data, either basis of themes, or it has to be so done so that you can take certain areas and code them accordingly, put them into order, and then you compress your data to it for it to be meaningful, so that it is arranged. So these are how you use the information obtained from a unstructured questionnaire. Challenges are there, but definitely when you have to inquire about deep understanding of things, feelings, these are the best ways, these are the best tools to be used. And uh, as I said, making them is not so tough, but yes, getting information and concluding from that information is definitely a lengthy task and needs a lot of effort, needs a lot of insight on the part of the researcher. Priya ma'am, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have certain questions, or should I?
Yeah, we have many questions, ma'am.
Right. So I would take the questions first, and then if you still have the time, we can see that video if it is.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, thank you for your wonderful presentation.
Oh,
And we have lot of appreciation for this presentation. All many are saying that very informative, fruitful, and wonderful session, well explained, nice PPT, and go on like that.
okay.
One more participant, she is from Gujarat. She is saying, "Ma'am, your lectures are mind blowing, so simple and easy. I have attended your another webinar organized by IIT Gujarat." So
Right,
like that.
right, right.
Now we will go for the section question answer.
Yeah,
First question from Minal Mishra. Can
yeah.
semi-structured interview be considered as open-ended?
See, semi-structured interview, when we are talking of, it is having certain questions which are structured and certain questions which are not structured. So if you are saying it is not a totally open-ended interview, but those questions which are not structured give you insight into information. So how will you say a semi-structured interview into open-ended? It is a semi-structured interview which is having questions which are structured and unstructured. So why do you want to call it open-ended? You call it a semi-structured interview, and it is giving you information where I always said a closed-ended questionnaire, a question supported by an open-ended questionnaire, a question gives you a lot of insight into data. So use semi-structured interview first. You structure your interview so that the respondent gets free, and then go to the unstructured part. Why do you want to call it open-ended?
Thank you, ma'am. Another question from Proceed D'Souza. While using reflective journals, do we have to use unstructured questionnaire? How do we develop such a questionnaire?
See, now here I can say you can use unstructured questionnaire, but then you will have to go into the thematic and the semantic analysis of the things. So that you will have to, while you using the reflective journals, you will have to get the answers which are there, which come from inside. So better it is to use the unstructured part of interview, because again, see, reflective responses or reflective insights cannot be there into a preconceived notion. If you have preconceived, then where is the reflection? Reflection is something when you think over and come out with new. And again, if you are limiting your responses to certain predetermined choices, then there will not be a reflection. So for reflective journals, we generally should prefer the open-ended questions, because they give you the insight. Again, I'm saying again and again, see, a response can be limited, but the inside will not be there. So you have to have that for a reflective journal. Unless you have those open-ended questions, you cannot have actually the reflection from a person. Priya ma'am, I don't know if I'm able to satisfy the hello. Hello.
Ma'am, we have a question from Meera Swami.
Right.
Is it agreeable to have contacts between the interview and interviewer on and off as the researcher goes further in his or her research?
Why not? See, I was talking ki your the person whom you are asking, you're taking an interview, if he feels that collaboration is there, why not you have the contact afterwards? Maybe certain things which you have missed during those your interview, maybe the respondent feels he needs to share it. So why do you want to, I mean, I think it is always better that while you are interviewing a person, you have such good camaraderie between them, so that the person doesn't feel offended and he's always ready to be interviewed by you again and again. Why not? It should be there and it should be maintained, and you should have the person who's being interviewed should not feel that you have you will misuse his information, or whatever you are doing will somehow not be beneficial for him. So why not? There should be a contact. Why not? I think matlab, I have seen people responding in the press and they say, oh, I remembered you have interviewed me before. So what is the harm? I think it's absolutely, it should be there, so that you should feel that person who has interviewed you has developed a relationship which goes further on. No problem in that. Why do you have
Okay.
to cut off with a person whom you have interviewed? Don't be an interviewer like that. And like sometimes we have, I mean, I shouldn't be taking names, like sometimes we have interviews of Arnab Goswami which are so the person gets offended. So like those, I mean, the both of you should feel comfortable. Sometimes we see on the television the person who's asking question gets aggressive, the person who's responding doesn't feel comfortable, or maybe they're just showing on the television, I don't know. But if that situation should not be there, an interviewee and an interviewer should always have a relationship. Otherwise, why will a person share with you your ideas? See, unless you are comfortable with a person, you don't share your inner feelings with him. You will give the normative answers which are expected out of you, that yes, this is good. This is like, if you ask a child what is your favorite pastime, if he sees ki, acha, this person is your teacher, he'll say, oh, I like to study books. Maybe he doesn't like to do it, so he should feel comfortable while he's answering to you in very. And for that, if the contact is before and afterwards, what is the harm in that? I mean, I don't feel anything. Maybe I'll have to check again whether the credibility or the bias doesn't arise into it. That should not be, and that is the part of the interview. Even if you have a good relationship with a person, his and you feel his views are not objective on certain things, are not right on certain things, you should restrict your biases there, but you can have contact, or that doesn't have to be stopped. Priya ma'am, again, I may not be able to satisfy all the questions, but I'm trying
Yeah,
my
yeah.
best to give answers.
Yes, ma'am. Because of time constraint, this is the last question,
Okay, okay.
which is from Juan John.
Yeah.
Ma'am, for responses to open-ended questions, would coding be a mean to analyze such responses? Because we need to look for patterns, commonalities, etc. So
That
he's
you have to do. See, that you have to establish. When I was talking about, you have to establish certain codes for certain things. Again, it can be a word, it can be a phrase, it can be a feeling, it can be, like I said, it can be a theme, it can be a word. So that you have to put, because otherwise, how will you how will you how will you compress that data which you have? So you have to be very, very, that you have to do. And again, I say, this is where the technical expertise of the researcher comes into point, where what codes he's doing. Because otherwise, without coding, you may get so many responses, how you are interpreting that, also how you're putting it into writing. See, a very, very important point of a very important aspect, not point of qualitative researches, is that you have to write the things very properly, you have to record the things very properly. And therefore, here also, the data, the aspects, the information, let's not call it data, because when we start calling it data, we start thinking of numbers or words. Let's call it information which we are getting from an interview. It has to be uh, code it so that we can put it in a systematic manner and analyze that. We have to do it, otherwise. But how you do the coding, that is where that coding should be such that it covers all the information which you have got. Otherwise, see, so much effort which you have put in, so much things which you have recorded will not be uh, uh, actually be meaningful if you are not able to put them into your research findings, and come out with them in a proper form. So that is very important. Yes, you have to code, but how you code, what themes, what words, what feelings you put in mind, that has to be important.
okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, I just want to remind you, you want to show the video?
We can leave it, because that was just a YouTube video. I thought
Okay.
anyone can. If you go to YouTube, you have nice videos. I mean, when Priya ma'am was getting me ready for this, I was at that time only, I was seeing how to share, so
Okay.
I came.
I'll,
So
okay.
it
Or
is,
if you can share the link, you can share in
I
the
will.
chat box. Yeah.
Right, I'll share the link.
Now
So
we are towards the end of the session. It is time for formally proposed vote of thanks. Thank you, Professor Anjali ma'am, for the wonderful presentation. Now, all the participants of today's session, they have appreciated your presentation. Madam has started the presentation by differentiating structural and unstructured tools. She also explained in detail how to construct effective open-ended questions along with different types of open-ended questions, mainly technically apparent and really open-ended questions. Madam also given a comprehensive idea about unstructured interview, its type, and various tools by which the researcher can conduct unstructured interview. At the end, Vajpayee ma'am have also shared with us examples for unstructured interview. And throughout the session, she is given so many examples, and not only me, all the participants, they are appreciated the same. Thank you very much, ma'am. I am sure every participant of today's webinar will truly benefit out of your presentation. I
thank you,
take this
Priya ma'am.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. I take this opportunity to express my gratitude to Dr. Bhagawan Balani, Principal, Bombay Teachers Training College, HSNC University, and Dr. Shafali Pandya, Professor and Head, Department of Education, Mumbai University, for their constant motivation and support throughout this webinar. I thank all BTTC team, Department of Education team, BAAP for their timely help and support. A big thank you to all student volunteers who are constantly helping each one of us and making this event a grand success. How can I forget you, the audience? Every day, your feedback and comments throughout the session motivate us, guide us to do better and better. Thank you for the overwhelming participation. All the participants, please be with us tomorrow at 11 a.m. on our YouTube channel, BTTC Official, for our 9th session on qualitative data analysis by Dr. Sibyl Thomas, Associate Professor, Department of Education, University of Mumbai. I just give a reminder, please fill up the feedback form, which will be available in the Telegram channel as well as in the YouTube chat. Please, now we will raise for the national anthem. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Anjali madam, for being
Thank
with
you,
us,
sir.
ma'am.
I know. Thank you, Shefali ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Most welcome and thanks to you, madam, for coming with us.
No, Shefali ma'am, it's all due to you. Thank you for connecting me with so many people. Thank you so much.